Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Esports Central Podcast. We're here for episode 9, and this episode is very special and dear to my heart because we got another two-time guest back on, Mr. Zyori, Andrew Campbell. This guy is a big shot. Zyori, I know you're jumping in, getting ready to talk, but I got to hype you up here for a second, right? So for those of you who don't come from the Dota world or know this guy, let me give you the rundown, okay? He's founder of Moondark Studios, you know where Sir Action Slacks is contracted from to work. He has been casting forever, literally forever in the Dota 2 world. He's worked at TI before. He was a big shot in Heroes of New Earth when it comes to casting there. And he's one of two people who have written a book in esports. Zyori, did I get your CV right there?
That's pretty darn close. I think more than two people have written books now. There's actually a couple of them. That gap in the market, I think, has been filled for sure. But one of two people, I guess, in the Dota space now that's written a book. It's just me and Red Eye, I think, are the two. And Red Eye's written two of them. So there you go. He's still besting me. But excited to be here, buddy. I guess I am the two-time now. What's up, Doc? It feels good.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you back. I think the minute I interviewed Sir Action Slacks, I don't know if you remember my old co-host Snare, he told me, yo dog, if Zyori said he liked your podcast, call him again, get him on there. I was like, relax man, me and Zyori will link up again, but not just yet.
Yeah, that podcast he did with Slacks was pretty cool. I was watching it, and it took me a minute because I think he said South American at first. Somebody said that you were an SA analyst, not South African. And it took me a minute to try to figure out. And then somebody said, you've interviewed him. I'm like, I haven't interviewed like anyone from South America, especially in the analyst realm. So who the fuck is this guy? And at first I thought it was somebody claiming a false credential. Then somebody linked me and I went, oh, that essay on it. Okay, yes. And then I went back and I had to listen to a little bit of our podcast and I remembered everything. It all came back. And yeah, man, I'm excited to do it again. That podcast was great. I remember your co-host vividly. It was awesome. What's he doing? Where is he?
You see, I think I have a very strong opinion on my man Snare. I think the guy is far too brilliant for the gaming world. So when I told him, listen, the show's going to close down and when he comes back, it might be a solo show. He was like, oh yeah, I even forgot we were doing a podcast anyway. So I was like, yeah, man, that sounds about right. But he's still casting Dota. He's very dedicated. He's been a bit busy. He got a job and things now, but like, he's still there. I hope to see him at TI one day. I pray for my brethren. But I think this podcast, his time ran out. I kicked him because he's always late. I'm kidding, Snare.
Gotcha. Had to get into the real world. Nah, man, it's cool. Respect. You got to move on. You got to keep things fresh. Cycle it up. I'm doing Zyori +1. Now I needed a break from Trent. Had to start my own thing so I could get some one-on-one time with some other people in the podcast world. It's how you got to do, buddy.
You know what I really liked about your podcast with Trent is that for so long he was coming onto the podcast and he was still just called the Zyori podcast, and that shit was just so funny. Like he's there for every episode, but it was still the Zyori podcast,
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's if you think about the real world, I don't know if that's unprecedented. Like a lot of the classic like TV shows, right? That Tonight Show type format, there's a main host and then they always have a sidekick. So it's a little bit of a like shitty role to be like, yeah, it's the Zyori show and Trent's my sidekick instead of us both being co-hosts. But in terms of that formula, it's not the craziest thing in the world. I agree, maybe not the best look for me to just be like, hey man, you want to be my Andy Richter and I'll be Conan O'Brien? That's like saying, hey, I'll be the skipper and you can be Gilligan. You want to get into some role play? Like nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to do that.
No, I found it hilarious because obviously you guys work together at Moondark, so I know it's not even anything that deep. There's no like real beef, so it's just like, if you're just fucking with a friend, that's the thing. I love to see it, man. I would do the same thing.
Yeah, well, don't forget, when I put his name in the show, it is now the Trent and Zyori podcast, partially because it rings better and is alphabetical, but also because now I get the bonus friendship points of that I get to milk forever of saying, buddy, I put you first in my own show. That's something. That's really something. Now we're bonded. We're connected. It's like it's a digital a blood pact,
I get that. But maybe if Trent listens to this podcast, he'll be saying this is fake news. Maybe he just beat you in a bet, Zyori, and he was like, it's going to be the Trent and Zyori podcast now.
It's true. I think I've been accidentally spreading fake news about Trent because I misremember what he says. And sometimes it's for dramatic effect because it's funny to exaggerate his bullshit takes. But also, I'm bad at remembering. And sometimes I've gone back and found the clip that I'm referencing and go, oh, yeah, he didn't really say that. I was like 50% off. Fuck. So it's a mixture. But It's all for a good laugh. So hey, man, usually worth it.
All right, respect, dog. I can get behind that as a bad paraphrase myself. So, okay,
Yeah.
I only have one request really in this podcast. You know, this is an open space. People can talk about whatever they want. I'm a crazy guy. You're a real dude. We'll get into it. But I do have one request, right? So that podcast
right,
you
what
mentioned
is
where I interviewed Slacks, he threw a lot of shade. Obviously, again, it's friends. It's just banter. I love to see it. But we got to get him back. That guy talks so much bad smack, unwarranted, that we have to flame him on
me?
this one. Yeah.
Or on you? Okay.
On you. He was going at
Do
you.
you have a summary? Do you have so I did watch some of it, but I admit I was multitasking. I was working on some other stuff while it was on. Is there a little laundry list here, a bullet point of the accusations?
Okay, so let's get to the first one, and this is where the real meat of it is. I asked him because I was talking about your book at some point, and he's like, whoa, no spoilers. And I was like, Slacks, aren't you supposed to do a voiceover for the book or some shit? He's like, yeah, but I'll get to that. So I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And he's like, besides, I'm not motivated because Zyori's book, it was all lies. He says he remembers all shit he didn't remember, and I was like, Slacks, is that really true? So let's ask the man himself. What do you say, Zyori?
Well, it's a weird accusation. I do remember him saying that now that you bring it up, and I don't really get his analysis that because I can remember specific people's names that it's like bullshit, that those are minute details. Maybe that speaks to how he operates and that everyone is a nameless face and he plays that cold read game of like, hey, buddy. Oh, yeah, you. Yeah, no, you're awesome. And then you walk away. It's like, who is that guy? No fucking clue. But you think you're like best friends with him. I think that's what that is more reflective of. And really, he's projecting that truth onto me. Like the case of Stephanie from HR, some of that is like, I didn't include her last name intentionally because I don't want to dox the person, but there's a lot of Stephanies in HR out there in America for sure. And that's somebody, like, I still have an email record with that person. I have the contract that they sent me that she signed. So like, I have records of all this shit. It's not like I made it up. These were contracts that I'm not going to post the contract, but I got the data from sources that I have bookkeepings of. So, yeah, I don't know, man. I think that's just mindless bullshit, but what are you going to do? It's fine. I like Slacks' style of marketing. I will say at Midas Mode 2, all right, I was where I dropped the book. That was the big release. Officially, September 17th, 2019 is the published date of Surviving Esports. And everybody in the green room was like, yo, man, this thing's on the panel. If you're not on it, can I make fun of this? I was like, guys, free range. Go in. Anything goes. No holds barred. Any joke is good. All publicity is good. You want to light one on fire? I will give you a promo copy to do that with. Here's one that got ruined in shipping. Burn it, So I was ready for that. And maybe that was a mistake to really go that far in terms of the free pass. Seinfeld, when they do that flashback of like why Kramer takes all of Jerry's stuff, because right when they moved in, Jerry said, oh yeah, sure, help yourself to whatever you want. And Kramer took it literally like it's a contract. So 10 years later, he's still opening the fridge like, well, you said I could take whatever I want whenever I want. And it's like, yeah, kind of. That's sort of what I meant. You're really pushing this to the limit here. So, yeah, there was a whole plan for him to do a full audio book that we were going to sell and monetize, and obviously he would get a giant portion of those proceeds. The majority, in fact, if I remember the negotiations, but that still was not motivation for him to read more than a third of it. So here we are.
Okay, so you said a lot of serious things there, but I heard a decent amount of shade that we're going to throw at Sir Action Slacks. Slacks, if you're watching this, I'm going to be blunt because I think you'd appreciate it. So Zyori called you a fucking liar, firstly, and he said you have a bad memory. So that's the rebuttal. How are you going to deal with that?
And I said that he's projecting his bullshit onto me. That's a big one. That's a big one. That one's going to cut him deep.
That one was nice. I really liked that one. Sorry, I forgot it. Good thing for remembering this. So Slacks, there's the shade at him. So Zyori, you're an interesting character to me for a number of reasons. I've been a fan of you for a long time, and like you've had a lot of progressions in terms of how the esports scene went. The last time you were on this podcast, we spoke mostly about the book and the happenings there. But I think why this podcast, in my opinion, is really important to do now is that I think at the moment, I see a lot of conversations going around, especially, like, I come from a South African context, so hopefully South African listeners would listen to this and hear what Zyori has to say, because I think he has a lot of insight, is that in terms of internet culture, there's a lot of things people fear, rather. And I think like one of those things, everybody's like, oh, but the internet is so dangerous. What if you got one bad moment you caught and your whole career is just gone? If we in broadcast, if we say the N-word once, we're going to get fired for life. And, there's that whole rhetoric that goes around all the time. And I think it's, the term that people like to use, it quote unquote cancel culture. And I think it's a bit of a meme, but you, somebody who's actually experienced this in a lot of ways. I think the sniff incident for me is like, most bad luck thing, right? Where you got caught on camera when you thought the thing was off and it just happened to be on. Obviously, I think in your book you dealt with dealing with it well, but what do you have to say to people who do worry about getting, that bad luck on camera or on live stream or on Twitter or on something like that?
Well, I wouldn't say that dropping an N-bomb on a broadcast is bad luck. I think that's bad judgment, for sure, and maybe bad character. So that one's particularly a bad example because we used to joke like at BTS that like you're always one N-bomb away from the last broadcast of your life, and that's a dramatic way to say like saying anything over the line, it just takes one and you could be done, right? And that's that word in particular is like a zero tolerance policy for the most part. There are some people that have gotten away with saying it. Toby was one, actually, that got away with it for a pretty long time. I think Sadakis, right, in Counter-Strike. Am I crazy? I hope I didn't just misname someone, but I think so. I think it popped out sometime or another that ended up on record. And if I'm wrong there, God, I apologize, but I'm pretty sure I'm remembering it right. So, yeah, I think there's like a degree of cancel culture that is acceptable, to some sort of a reasonable expectation of like, yeah, if you're a broadcaster, you have a voice, you're kind of by definition a bit of a role model, and that means you need to wield that sword with some degree of responsibility. I think that's a fair take.
That's what I actually meant. When I meant like, I think it's a bunch of nonsense because I didn't actually explain myself properly. It's that I think it's not cancel culture. It's a consequence for your action, if you do something like that. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah. So, but I also think there's another side of it that is a little bit ridiculous, especially when it's less timely. Like here's an example of one that I thought was maybe an interesting thought experiment. Jimmy Kimmel recording a Christmas album with Snoop Dogg 20 years ago where Jimmy Kimmel says the N-word. I don't know if that's a reason to cancel Jimmy Kimmel now. Is it kind of distasteful? Yeah, sure. He did it with Snoop Dogg. One wonders what the studio atmosphere was like. Is there a world where Jimmy was kind of saying, are you sure I can get away with saying this? And Snoop and his buddies are all there, and they're like, hell yeah, Jimmy. We've hung out for decades. We're smoking blunts together. This Christmas rap's going to be dope. We got you, Jimmy. No one's going to listen to this shit anyway. So then Jimmy gets peer pressured into saying it. And then 20 years later, all these people are like, Jimmy, why the fuck would you say that? And, I don't know that that's the case. I'm just saying if we don't necessarily know the context, it's hard to apply a modern day lens to something that happened 2 decades ago, 1-to-1. Right. So hopefully saying that isn't even really a hot take. I don't feel like it is, but maybe somebody will take it as such. Because that seems, like I said, zero tolerance, right? So I guess that's what zero tolerance means. Anyway, I'm saying all that as just a roundabout way to point out cancel culture gets complicated. And somebody somewhere along the line said to me, and maybe it was to a talent, maybe on Twitter or something, that had gotten away with saying something, and it was complaining about cancel culture. And someone said, yeah, but are you really canceled? Aren't you still working right now? Like, yeah, this was a pain in the ass. It dragged you down. You got right through the mud, but you didn't really get canceled. You were threatened with being canceled. Wasn't there a Counter-Strike talent that had a false allegation in the MeToo movement?
Right. So there was Henry G.
Do you know the name?
Henry G,
okay.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say the wrong name. Henry G, yes. So, and in his case, it was basically proven and accepted that it was a false allegation and that he was really the victim in the whole thing. Is that correct?
That's not how I read the situation. And I thought that one was I think what that guy said on Twitter, I kind of agreed with, is that, sure, 100%, what is going on for him and his brand and stuff with these allegations and things going on, horrible. Definitely not a good look, net negative to him, etc. But at the same time, you're still gonna be. That's what I told everybody who came to me. Is like, no, this thing is disgusting. That's happening. How can people be doing this? Why don't they go to the police? All that stuff. I was like, listen, yeah, sure, it ain't pretty right now, but 100% Henry G is gonna be working in 6 months' time. Take a fucking bet with me, and there he is.
Yeah.
The situation resolved itself, and it kind of moved. Not everybody's Henry G, mind you. I will say that, but you have to look at each situation, like you say. It's a 1-to-1. You can't compare and all that kind of shit. You just have to look at the situation, look at the facts, and decide for yourself in the sense, because that's all you can do.
Yeah, it's weird, right? So, and this is like, it gets tricky. It's like navigating a field of landmines, because you don't want to be insensitive to Henry, where it's like, well, dude, you're totally fine. Come on, buck up. It's like, no, I've been through an experience that is at least tangentially similar to that, and that like really is a oversimplification of what it's like to go through that. It's a emotional roller coaster. It is damaging. It's stressful as fuck. You really need to take time to reflect and process and talk to people, and it's very challenging, I guess is maybe a way to frame it. So I'm empathetic to that. But I witnessed that Twitter exchange or whatever it was, and definitely thought about that myself, of like, okay, I at first had that, train of thought, fuck cancel culture. This is unfair. I'm being unfairly canceled. But then you kind of stop and go, wait a minute. Okay, maybe there are some things I did wrong. Maybe there are some things I can learn from this. And then, all right, if I can kind of come to terms with that, process that, grow from that, and then still put my hat in the ring to do work, if I get hired, am I really being canceled? Right. And I have trouble saying yes to that, right? I'm working Epic League right now. So, I don't know. Is that an answer to your question? It's I don't know the answers exactly, because as I pointed out before, there's a degree to which cancel culture is healthy. We should oust bad actors and get them the fuck out of our space. I don't want to, so that some of that is good. Let's cancel the people that are actually bad. I guess it's deciding who gets to wield that power, and when do we go too far, and what is worth a perma ban? I think that's a complicated discussion that is hard to have on Twitter alone.
Right.
It takes a lot more characters to figure that out. And so can I ask you a question, buddy?
Go for it.
Do you think Red Eye is going to make a comeback into esports?
So, okay, Red Eye is another great example, because I think it's pretty similar to the Henry G example. But I want to just respond to what you said there quickly. It's like you say, there's all that other aspects that come to it. Sure, you're working Epic League and stuff right now, but there was a level of emotional turmoil you have to go to. I mean, these really big allegations are going on with people doing truly atrocious things, and now maybe you didn't do the same thing to them, but you're getting put in the same bracket. How do you deal with it emotionally? Trust me, I can actually, I understand. I actually understand. I'm not something I'm going to say on the podcast, but I can understand it for sure. But at the same time, it's like, you also have to think then yourself, why does it happen? Because again, the reason cancel culture exists is because failings in the system. So that's what I also, when I have these discussions and stuff, I think, although sure, all of us on the internet have a big issue with cancel culture, because that's the biggest risk to us, not being able to play our games anymore, or shoutcast our games anymore, etc. But again, I think the important thing, the perspective that a lot of people need to have, is that it's look at what the service it's providing. Maybe it's not a perfect system right now, but it's filling a gap that's actually not being addressed right now. So in the greater grand scheme of things, and I don't know if it's offensive to you for me saying that, I think it's good that we have this thing for sure. So yeah. I'll answer your question about Red Eye as well.
Well, like, we're trending in the right direction, right? It's like, it would be great if human growth could be this kind of balanced, linear growth where things are calibrated and it's pretty fair and people don't get kind of lost in the system. But that's not really how human growth works. We realize something's a problem, everybody tunes into it, we get out some really bad people and do a good job, and then we overreach and it goes too far, and then we go, oh fuck, we took this too far, and then we dial it back. And then oftentimes we dial it back too far, and then some bad people pop up again and get away with some shit, and we go, oh, what the fuck, man? And then it's this oscillating curve that trends positively over time, but in certain moments it can be extreme in its opposite directions. You know, you can see that pattern in a lot of things in life, like politics, especially American politics. Oh, this blue guy sucks. Let's get the red guy in. 8 years later, this red guy was terrible. Let's get the blue guy in. Give him a try. And it just goes back and forth in 4 to 8 year chunks like that. So that's sort of human nature to a degree. And you just have to sometimes take a step back and recognize that, you know, in the moment, yes, this is really bad. I've got some reflecting to do, some processing and growth and all that stuff. But, you know, always optimistic about the long term. Personally, I can grow and change. And I think in general, the community can as well. Still a long ways to go, but we're making some baby steps. I don't hear what people often call gamer words in my pubs nearly as much as I used to. And I think that list of gamer words is growing. And in a good way, right? Like the list of things that you hear people not say because it's just inappropriate is growing, and people are just generally communicating in a nicer and, dare I say, a polarizing word, inclusive way.
Right.
And I think that's overall good. Overall good. At least from my anecdotal limited experience, I've observed some gradual positive change, I would say.
Right. That was like,
for whatever that's worth.
I think that what you said, and even what you were saying earlier about how you yourself had to go through the reflections, is like the important thing for me. Is like somebody was asking, then so I'll tell you a personal story here to people and the viewers. I don't know if I've said this publicly before, and to you, is that when that whole MeToo movement went on in the Dota world and in the esports world in general, that's the reason season 1 of this podcast shut down. Because when that shit was going on, I was like, no fucking way am I going to come and talk about Astralis and this shit and that shit when like the scene is this fucked and I don't know what to add to this thing. So I told the Esports Central bosses, I was like, listen, I'm not fucking doing this podcast anymore. I'm not in the headspace to do this kind of shit. They said, you know what, take your time, whatever. We'll chat in the future. And I said, okay, cool. So I get it to a certain extent, but I think like over time I realized, and even when I was engaging in a lot of conversations and stuff at the time with my friends about the things that are happening and things, and I think one person said to me, is like, oh, but look at Zyori's situation. How is this thing looking, whatever? And I was like, okay, listen, let's assume worst case scenario that Zyori's getting flack 100% in the wrong year, right? Like that he was right, this is a lie, this is whatever. I'm like, assume that's the situation, but think about the nuance or whatever in the discussion that's happening now, right? So again, I don't want to be insensitive to you to say you deserve this or anything like that, but I think if people are actually taking the time to engage in what's being said and think about it, not just, okay, no, this one said this is a big Dota figure, that's how it is now, or just think in your own personal life how it works and how it reflects. If there's actual critical engagement going on, it can still be for the better in a sense. But I don't want to be insensitive to you now, my guest on this podcast, and I'm a personal fan of you, so I don't know what you think about that.
I have a hardened exterior. I doubt you could offend me if you tried, buddy. So don't worry. Yes. I worry for you about asking the wrong question because some people are really fierce about that kind of stuff. But no, for me, no worries, bud. It's all good. I mean, one interesting dynamic about the Me Too thing is that part of why I was so extreme for me personally is because I was the first person specifically named. So that fact, independent of the allegations, how you feel about the allegations, whether you think they carry a lot of weight or they don't carry much weight at all, just being that first person who is specifically put in headlines next to the word accused means the entire focus was on me first before it shifted to other people. Okay. And that's intense. And whatever, I've been through sniff before, so that kind of primed me a little bit for the experience of that level of internet microscope where all your shit's just blowing up, positive, negative, stuff in between, Reddit threads with your name in the title with thousands of comments that are, you're refreshing it every minute, and more comments than you can read them coming in, kind of a feeling. It's overwhelming. Right. But something that multiple people told me that were close to the movement, most of them were women in the gaming space, said that me being named first and then the amount of support that people had for just listening to the allegations gave them the confidence to come forward with some of the people that we did actually get rid of. Right. In the Dota space. And we don't need to name specific names, but we kind of know who they are. Some of those people had that stuff written, and were very scared to come forward at fear of backlash because they were so popular and had so much clout. And I guess there was enough of a metered reaction that they kind of felt like, okay, I need to come forward now. The floodgates kind of been opened. I'm not the only one. And I can empathize with that, as I wrote in my blog with this whole cross-dressing thing, where I was kind of afraid to come out, and I wasn't really planning on it until that day I saw hashtag National Coming Out Day.
Right.
And that kind of gave me the final push to go, I'm not the only one. I can kind of blend in, and it's not just a microscope on me if I come out with this today. So I get it. I understand that psychological thing that kicks in there when you're not the only. Nobody wants to be the first one. I totally understand that fear. That's really scary. So that's like a weird positive, that the thing that happened to me, fair or unfair, kind of empowered other people to actually do really powerful stuff that got rid of other people. So, like, I don't want to take credit for that. That's not what I'm getting at. But I think it's more of just, if there's any truth to that, that's a big net positive that I can sort of take away from, sort of, as you're saying, like, there's a lot of good that came from that whole experience. It really sucked when it happened. I really thought it was going to be the end of Zyori, but we found a way to kind of work through it. And most of that's just a testament to having a great support system, really good friends, and a lot of people that were willing to take the time to listen to me and then also tell me some shit that I needed to hear, you know?
Right.
So that, like, I wouldn't have been able to navigate that without those people that were willing to volunteer some of their, like, real talk mental bandwidth. And a lot of those people had a lot of, a lot of DMs, a lot of questions, a lot of people they were trying to help. And it's like bandwidth was limited at that time.
Yes.
So I'm appreciative and almost a little bit lucky that there were so many people that believed there was enough gray area in my accusations that I wasn't a lost cause, that I was worth talking to at least see, hear my side and try to give me some perspective on the other side. So again, it's like, I don't want to name specific people, but some of them are pretty prominent figures that whose names you would recognize. And the fact that they were willing to do that even privately is a big fucking deal. And that's, I think, a big piece of how I was able to try and turn that whole thing into, like, let's look at the positives. Let's look at the people helped through this. And I mean, I sort of inadvertently came out as bisexual through all that. I didn't really want to, but it sort of got dropped in that video because it was just relevant for the context. There was no way to give the context of what I was experiencing and the weird social pressures that were happening at the time without explaining that somehow.
Right.
So that led to a huge influx of DMs and private messages and people on Discord just talking about representation and difficulties around even just that dialogue of men versus women in Dota. That excludes everybody who's binary, transgender, anywhere on the spectrum that isn't just kind of cis male or female. So in some ways that dialogue is a little bit exclusionary, and a lot of people sent me really thoughtful, like, essays explaining that in a really emotional, anecdotal manner that, I don't know, it kind of changed my perspective. And all that accumulated to getting me to this point of being like, fuck it, man, I'm going to be me. And if that empowers anybody else out there, if that helps anyone else break through a barrier or a conversation with their stepson or their parents or whatever it is, or even just feeling like they're not alone in the universe, fuck it, man. That outweighs whatever negative messages or bullshit Bible verses I get tweeted at me by, like, orders of magnitude, Right. So again, sorry, that was a fucking verbose little soapbox there, but thanks for coming to my TED Talk, bud.
I paid to be here. No, I'm kidding. So there was a lot there. So, okay, so first I have to say, it was my fault as a host that I used the wrong terminology and I brought up cancel culture. So we got to, I suppose, the most difficult point of conversation right from the start. I was actually trying to refer to Sniff, but I brought up cancel culture because I'm an idiot. So I'm glad, though, because I think this conversation, I don't know if myself and Zyori, if the listeners think we're having a good conversation or we're saying the wrong thing. I'm willing to take that L. I don't think I'm an expert or authority on this shit at all. I have some thoughts, but that's all they are. I'm not a fucking authority. I'm just asking questions. Yeah? And if it's the wrong questions, feel free to say. But I do like that we went here. And I think I want to get to the whole coming out blog as well, because I think that's pretty awesome. And there's a few questions I have there as well. But to answer your question you asked me about Red Eye, to go back to it, is that now that's also a touchy thing for me, because here in South Africa, people I had a few hate threads and stuff going on about me, because at some point when he came down for an event last year, he tweeted something, and I thought it was a bit sus. So I went like, listen, yeah, man, I don't think this is the right way. And like Red Eye, because he's one of the few international talents who, talks about South Africa, and he's been here and he's worked events here. He's like a fucking deity to the South African gaming community. So the fact
he had
that
a real hard on for South Africa. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I never understood that, but I realized when they announced Code Red, like half the talent were South African. I was like, what the fuck? And like I do you know why that is? Is it just, did they just see it as a growth area for gaming, or like does he have a connection there? Or I just never understood. It's a genuine question. I'm not even taking a shot here. It's just an odd observation.
I'm going to answer this honestly and send this to my editor afterwards. I don't know if this is going to get cut or I'll be able to keep it in, because I might get sued. But we'll see.
Buddy, this is how you start a Patreon. This is exactly how they do it on the major podcasts. They watch some fucked up clip and go, hey, this is redacted for YouTube, but if you pay us $5, you can watch us watch pornography over here on this other website that doesn't give a shit. That's how you monetize this shit, dude. I'm just throwing that out there in case you're looking to...
In South Africa, we have the stereotype that Indian people, which that's my ethnicity, are good at business, but I suck at business. So I'm going to write down your note and take it sometime. So, okay, so this is... I'm going to get into... I'm probably going to have to cut this, but I'm going to tell it to you anyway. And if I don't cut it, you lucky motherfucker viewers. So I have an opinion that So we had something here called ESL Africa, right? Now, Barry had ties because... I don't know... that's also a Freudian slip. Paul had ties because he came here to South Africa to work in 2015 or 2016. He came to work at one of the rages, Mr. Red Eye, and then he made a lot of friends here. Tekko, who's one of the international talent now from South Africa, was one of his star talent at Code Red. Anthrax, Barry, who runs a tournament organizer here in South Africa, him and Paul became very good friends. And then obviously I don't know how Code Red got involved with ESL Africa as well, because again, I think the people doing that also got their connection through Red Eye as well when he came here. So ESL Africa, when it ran, all the talent were contracted through Code Red Esports. So that's why there was so many South African talent signed up there. Now, I don't think I said anything spicy, but how you guys read
I don't think
signing,
that's spicy.
Yeah,
but
signing
that's illuminating though. That makes sense.
Maybe my opinion on why they signed him and how they signed him and what they did for their talent, that's spicy, but I won't say that today. But that's how it happened. Now so many South African talent got signed. Did you see those South African talent work anywhere else other than Tech Girl, by the way?
Well, I mean, no, but I didn't really look either. So I guess I didn't make an assumption either way. I just assumed that there was some channel there, and hey, man, if you're signed to Code Red, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
What do I know?
So being myself, I have to say something spicy. I want you guys to ask why South African talent weren't shown. That's all I'm saying. But like I said, for Tekko,
I would guess it's because you guys work. It's because you work cheap, because your currency is worth less than a lot of the other major global currencies, right?
Yeah.
So they could pay you 200 euros a day, and you're like, fuck, that's great money, mate. And compared to them, that's like a third or like a fifth of what they'd pay a European or North American talent.
Right. Okay. So
is that right? Did I snipe it? Did I slay it?
No. So a lot of the talent didn't work. Like Tech Girl worked a lot. I mean, she worked not Overwatch League, the one below it, Contenders. She was the host there and stuff. She's genuinely a really good talent. She's an international level talent now. She worked through Code Red and stuff, but none of the other talent actually worked through Code Red at all. So it always rubbed me the wrong way that they were all signed there, but they never. But again, not to read or make any malicious claims. That is how it is.
Hey, buddy. I you know what? I don't even think this is spicy because I won't name names, but there are some talent that I have heard that were signed to Code Red that had very similar experiences that felt like they were slightly promised some sort of representation, and then they basically never heard a goddamn word from anyone, were never offered any gigs, and very little happened, and their face was still listed on that website like years after they had communicated with anybody as a representative there. So I don't know what that means. I had mostly neutral / positive experiences with Code Red, mostly just invoicing type stuff. I think they did some okay work in terms of trying to pressure lawsuits against like GESC and some of those other really shitty orgs. So I don't really have too many negative things to say about Code Red, but I can definitely report anecdotal similarities that it wasn't a it was not a traditional agency. It doesn't hold a candle to CSA or I'm blanking on the other really popular ones right now, but there's a number of really legit agencies representing players, streamers, talent across the board now that are doing really good work. And yeah, Code Red I don't think is in that category. Are they even relevant now? Are they still running, or did that shut down after Red Eye left?
I think they still work.
Well,
first I'm going to give us a pat on our backs.
Didn't need that to be such a hot take then.
No, we were pretty lukewarm. We didn't say anything too spicy. Editor, thank us. Okay, so back to the story. So I had tweeted something about Red Eye, and again, like I said, he's a deity here because he actually was one of the few people who worked here and things, and he had ties here and such. So then I was like in hot water. So before I even preface anything about Red Eye, fuck you guys for saying I hate the guy and all that shit. I don't. I'm just giving my opinion. But if y'all do say that, I mean, it's more publicity. Like Zyori said, it's good publicity, bad publicity. It is what it is as long as my name's out there. Lol. No, I'm kidding. I actually just genuinely don't care. So for me, this is again the thing where he obviously is quote unquote cancelled now in the scene. Obviously, he did a lot of bad things. A lot of things people say we can't prove he did or whatever. That's allegations made in pretty sus ways that don't have a lot of backing. But there was pretty clear things. I think the most clear-cut thing of him assaulting an employee, and there was witnesses there. I think that's, for me, in my opinion, enough to get cancelled. And I think it is, again, it's not cancelled. That's a consequence. If you are a boss attacking an employee, that's fucked up. And it's not just a behind-the-scenes boss. You are the face of esports. That's what you called yourself in your podcast and all that shit. Yeah. And you the godfather and shit. Listen, we don't have time for crap in esports. If you're fucking going to do that, get the fuck out. And now, I think also, another part of this is that, you see, when he got quote-unquote cancelled, there was a thing, and this, I'm not 100% sure, I just remember off memory a tweet I saw, but he signed, he got $1 million buyout or something of Code Red Esports. I'm not sure if I'm correct, so people go Google that and make sure. But if you're walking away, you're getting fired, or basically if you're not going to work talent anymore as a talent, and you're walking away with $1.2 million, that doesn't sound like the worst gig to me ever, Zyori. I don't know if I'm being harsh.
Do we know that he walked away with 1.2 million? How do we know that there wasn't a lot of debt with, was that his payout or just what the company sold for? Because very little of that could have ended up in his pocket. You know what I mean? What percentage of shares did Red Eye own of Code Red? I would guess it's not 100%.
Yes, definitely not.
Yeah, and I would guess that they probably had to pay some money for that London office and some of that other stuff. So I have no clue. I'm just saying, assuming that Red Eye walks away with 1.2 million is probably not reality.
Right.
But I do feel you. It's one of those it's a false equivalency though. Saying that thought experiment. Red Eye has $2 million in the bank and then he gets canceled. Does that justify Does that somehow justify the ethics of the canceling because he's financially stable? I think they're pretty independent, logical trees. So I agree that maybe that changes some of the empathy of the guy's not going to be homeless. So, okay, that's a slight positive, but I still feel bad for the guy if he's unfairly canceled. If. That podcast I did with Richard Lewis, I don't know if you caught it, but that kind of changed my perspective on the Red Eye thing a little bit. If it's very long, but there's timestamps, I'd recommend jumping into the middle and watching the part where we talk about Red Eye. Because I'll try to paraphrase. Richard Lewis kind of talks about how, God, I'm spacing a little bit on the details, but he defended Paul in a way that I found to be somewhat convincing in a physical violence is over the line, but isn't that kind of what court of law is for? And wasn't he kind of outed trial by jury or trial by Twitter, not really trial by jury? And if it really is this physical crime and all this stuff, then he should be charged. And then what is the punishment for that? Whatever it is, he can serve that punishment. And then that's kind of the whole point of the punishment. If he has to go to jail for 30 days, he can do that. Does that mean we have to take away his entire career and legacy because of that? And now I don't know the answers to those questions, but I think those are interesting questions that I hadn't exactly thought about in that way before. And those are the questions I walked away from that Richard Lewis conversation pondering, and I'm still not entirely sure, because I agree with you. That's not cool. And I think there's a degree of, if kind of like free market shit, you know, maybe that means Moonduck is not going to hire him because he's whatever, got a reputation for going to fisticuffs. That's one less TO that's going to hire him, right? Maybe PGL cuts ties with him because of that. That, I think, is sort of like fair market reaction, kind of like you're talking about, because you're a public figure, as you're saying. You're a role model. Your reputation matters. Think about movies and real TV. You know, Johnny Depp's out of that Disney thing. They bought him out of the contract, so they don't have to work with him anymore because of the current state of his brand and legal proceedings. Is he guilty or not, or whatever? We don't know. It's depending on your perspective. You'll have a different take on it. But Disney doesn't give a shit whether it's true or not. They're not the jury. They just don't want to roll the dice on anything that could be a brand risk, because a huge part of Disney's value proposition is pristine branding. Right. I think that's pretty fair. To me, that's fair marketplace shit. That's why Johnny has a good agent and good lawyers who put that buyout clause in that contract. So if they want to dump him, he walks away with, as you said, $4 million or $10 million or whatever it is to make him whole. So in that case, do I feel bad for Johnny Depp that he got canceled from that movie? No, because he had a legal team that kind of set it up so that he wins no matter what. Right. So again, just another example that adds to this complication of cancel culture, and like, is it good or bad? It kind of depends on the circumstances and just the nature of the relationship. And I think, you know, when you're working with Disney, that they want people that are pristine, you know? We knew that with the MDL major. They were going to hire people that were pristine, and they wanted talent to not do anything risky. And it's like, it's a Disney production, so it's Disney rules, you know? No IP infringement, where, you know, no copyrighted music, silence. We're doing silence, you know? So, yeah. Sorry, I got off track a little bit, but so I guess I don't really know. I guess there's a twofold question here. It's like, should he have been canceled, and do you think he will make a comeback? They're two different threads. Right. So we've kind of answered one to some degree. At least we've talked around this canceling of him. So what do you think? I mean, do you think he could make a comeback, and do you think he should make a comeback? Again, two slightly different threads.
Okay, that is interesting. I think I didn't actually catch your podcast with Richard Lewis. I never listened to that one, but the one with him and Slacks, they also kind of had a conversation about Red Eye getting cancelled and stuff. And I think the good point that they made was that the way Banks, and I think he's a good talent, he seems like a good guy or whatever, but the way it got done, it just like a bit sus. Obviously, he did perfect timing while there was all the support going on. It was a good way. Like he capitalized perfectly. Now, is this guy the good guy? And that's what Slacks was saying. We don't know, but he did this thing. And it also seems like, I'm not saying this, Banks, if you're listening to this, that it's a fucking conflict of interest, but it is kind of a conflict of interest when you have somebody who working the same job as Red Eye now getting Red Eye fired, because now Banks is working everything. I'm not saying that was the motivation behind it, or that's what happened or whatever, but again, if you want to use the business lens, it also becomes now, there's another layer to it. Now, should Red Eye come back? This is a tough one, because again, there was a lot of things said in that whole saga. Obviously, if he assaulted the guy as a boss in the workplace, sure, I think he should lose some part of his job. Should he lose all of it? I don't know. Should he be able to come back? Again, this is the thing where, this is the part about growth. Do you want to add something else?
What is be able to? You're like, what is be able to? Maybe one specific org decides to hire him. Because you have to admit, it's polarizing, and there would be a lot of eyeballs on that. And maybe that's monetizable. So maybe he works out some deal with ESL. There's some branding around it. Maybe there's a book release. I don't fucking know, man.
That's fair.
Maybe there's a documentary that goes into this story about how he's gone through therapy, and, you know, things have changed, and he's been working on it, and how gaming has been a part of that recovery. I'm just spitballing here. Right. I'm just saying that there's a lot of ways that a brand or a TO could take a risk on that and try to spin it to be a very positive sort of story. And because it's so polarizing, that is going to get a lot of clicks. So that's what I mean. Like, what does come back mean? And if that were to happen, does that mean he's suddenly back and on the circuit and everyone's going to hire him again? Not necessarily. Maybe there is some of that general market brand level where it's like, nope, he's still just not someone we want to work with anymore because of this history. But so I guess that's sort of what I'm getting at. Of there's levels of nuance to it. Like I'm predicting that we will see Red Eye again in some fashion. I don't think that tweet about the anniversary of whatever is the last tweet we'll ever see from Red Eye. Is that a hot take? Because I really don't think it is.
Because like you say, who's the like you said, my language is wrong there. Is he able to come back? Because if TO wants to hire him, that's their prerogative. Again, he doesn't have a official criminal record or anything like that. The man's just cancelled. But for all we know, there could be no consequences 3 years down the line. Sure, he doesn't work 3 years worth of events, but if he's back in it, that's not cancelled. That's not a
well. But
Netflix...
also, what are the consequences? Because so let's think about like criminal justice system, right? Like, what is jail? What is the point of the whole thing? America's failing miserably at this, but the point of it is getting people out of the system. What do they call it? Not reprimand, but I'm spacing on the word. Reform. That's it. You want to reform people, man. The goal is somebody's a criminal, and then you catch them, and then you send them to jail, and you teach them why that's bad that they did whatever they did, and how to get some skills or what to do when they get out of jail so they can be reformed and then be a normal person that has a job, pays taxes, and contributes to society. That's the dream. That is the dream model of criminal justice, right? So in this case, in terms of like, what is the ideal scenario if Red Eye's gone for 5 years and he actually does take that time to reflect, to learn, go to a therapist, use whatever tools, like you talked about how much money he presumably has in the bank. Maybe he spends a bunch of that on his mental health, his physical health, and he really does turn it around and become a beacon of positivity. Maybe he spreads some really positive message, whatever. Like, is that a bad thing? It is the net positive of all the different like realities that could occur,
right?
Just Red Eye being canceled and never coming back again? Or is there a reality where his reach and the extremity of him being canceled and then swinging to being someone that's positive and helps people, could that be more of a net benefit to the world if that were to happen? Again, I'm just spitballing here. I'm just throwing out some of these more complicated potential scenarios that speak to why cancel culture is more complicated than you said bad word, you're done forever.
Right.
You said this thing I don't agree with, you've lost your privilege to be a role model for young people. It's really complicated, and we without excusing bad behavior have to factor in that humans are so far from perfect and we all have faults, and things get harder and more complicated when you have to deal with balancing an ego of having a broadcasting facing career on the level that people like Red Eye have. It warps your perspective, and I don't know that means he is a lost soul for the end of eternity. And again, I hope that like isn't a hot take. I'm afraid I'm going to get tweets after this of people being like, you apologist, you're defending Red Eye, you're a piece of shit. And it's like, I'm not really trying to defend anybody. I just want to really emphasize the thoughtfulness that needs to take place when we're casting the sweeping power of taking away someone's career. That's really all I want. If you can honestly look me in the eye and tell me you've put in that thought and you still think he deserves to be canceled for eternity, that's fine, and I respect you for thinking about it and coming to that conclusion. What bugs me is the regurgitation of kind of what I did to Richard. Well, Red Eye's done forever, right? Well, actually, mate, have you really thought about it? Talk about it for 20 minutes and go, yeah, you're sort of right, actually. I didn't really think about that. I was sort of just regurgitating what I was reading everyone else agreeing with. And now that I'm thinking about it, I think there's maybe a little more gray area than I had originally thought. So I'm just encouraging everyone to try to explore that gray area, if even just in private thought.
Right.
There you go. That's centrist Zyori for you, bud.
Right. I officially don't have a position. Like I just said, fuck him, because that's what went through my mind. But the reason where obviously I have a bias because of the other thing I read, but on practicality of what he did, that we know, obviously people say he did this, they saw him, whatever, this guy was the one who is hit, all that nonsense. I think the why it becomes complicated is, let's say him and Richard Lewis got into a fight at a pub or even at an event. Richard Lewis was there as an independent broadcaster, Red Eye was there, and they fought. I don't think we even need to have a conversation about how their careers are going to go after that, because it's two people, independent people, getting into it, and that's it, right? Two guys were upset and they fought. But as the boss, if you were in a position of power and you were assaulting an employee, that power dynamic is not a pretty one. So
yes,
the consequence for that, now I need to, because that's what we were trying to give consequence to, right? So that's where I don't think I'm an authority on it.
It's not just a bar fight.
Yes, there we go.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So how severe? There should definitely be a
say.
consequence in my opinion. I don't know how far the consequence should be. I don't know who decides what the consequence is. Right now, we don't see Red Eye. If I see him in a broadcast in 3 years, would I be happy to see him? Or am I going to be tweeting, why is this fucker there? I don't know. I actually don't know. I do lean on the side that I think what he, like, if you're assaulting employees.
Doesn't some of it doesn't that depend on how it's presented? You know, like, what is that opening panel when he comes back? You don't think that changes your tweet or interpretation? No?
I don't
What
think
if
so.
he acknowledges it, you know?
Maybe. I mean,
you don't think there's anything he can say that
could use a smaller example. Let's use a smaller example, right?
Okay.
Like Puppy with, you know when he told Thompson to go kill himself, right?
I wasn't aware of that specifically.
So there was a pub they were playing, and Thompson figured out the glyphing, the creep wave meta to save your range creep before anybody else. But at that point, nobody knew what to do. But Thompson was doing it. So he did that in a pub, and Puppy was like, "You're a fucking dog shit player. Go kill yourself," etc. So obviously, in practical sense, it's Puppy said the wrong thing, right? But the way Puppy played it off when they asked him about it in an interview or whatever, he's like, "Guys," I don't think they even asked him, but he like addressed it in a way. He's like, "Guys, I should just be." I'm gonna try work harder to be smarter, to be better, but in a super cool, calm, puppy, charismatic way. He this worst form of press that should be coming to a player is now a good form of press because he's so suave about it. But this is the thing. This is why I think the way it comes back shouldn't be relevant. Is that we can't decide what we know what the crime is, but we don't know what the punishment is. If the crime is bad enough, it doesn't matter what he does afterwards. This is what Richard Lewis and Slacks were saying as well on the podcast, is that I don't want to hear shit about this one went to therapy and that one did this. And if it really is the case this happened, then fuck it. So if we can decide, we know what the crime is, if we can decide punishment, then it doesn't matter how it comes back. That's my opinion about it. Because, I mean, we can use a bigger examples, like use Kobe Bryant and Cristiano Ronaldo. Now, this is kind of, we get people a bit upset, but Cristiano Ronaldo on record admitted to raping somebody. But he's still out there doing things because he's big enough where it doesn't help. There's no way you're going to make this guy go away. Even with his bad reputation, he can still be there. You know?
No, I mean, it has been proven without a shadow of a doubt now that clout can outweigh values, ethics, characters. I mean, look at Trump, man. They all, like even his supporters, they don't deny that he's like grabbing girls and doing all this stuff that they don't really like. They just excuse it with, but he does all this other stuff really good, and that makes it worth it compared to the other option,
exactly.
Right? But they don't deny that he like said that or whatever. They just that's just locker room talk, you know? So, people definitely do that. And when there's clout, it's just like, well, he might be a piece of shit, but he really does kick a soccer ball really well, and I really love soccer, so...
Exactly. So
I guess I like him because I care about soccer more than I care about this person I've never met before that's alleging crimes against him. So it's a really shitty psychological thing for the average fan of these really high profile celebrities that they're not humanized. These aren't people that these fans know one-to-one that they invite over for dinner. These are like superstars that they idolize, kind of like superheroes, right?
Right.
So that's what complicates the judgment when they're trying to analyze, separating out their love for this person as an athlete with the allegations of somebody like Kobe Bryant, and then that's why that is such a polarizing issue, because that psychological conundrum is relatively challenged for the average person to reconcile. If I can say that without sounding like an elitist douchebag, you know what I mean though? Like that's a really complex thing to balance, because you love this person in so many regards and you can hate them in all these other regards, and they are connected because it's the same person, but in a lot of ways they feel very separate from each other,
So I think
whatever.
I think why that point you make is like so important. It's like, okay, so let's assume that Red Eye has recovered, and let's assume that myself, you, Zyori, and me, Kaameel, think that Red Eye should be able to come back. But if we look at it from that sense, where all these fans of Red Eye are there through and through, because I think Red Eye, from the talent figures, probably the biggest, right? Like he was, again, they called him the face of esports, etc. Especially in the Dota world, I think maybe we hype him up a bit more in the PC gaming side. He is this big polarizing figure. So even if, again, he has recreated himself in this right way, and myself and you think it's the right thing, but maybe him being out of the scene, showing that there's consequences even all the way from the top, has a trickle down effect where people are like, listen here, we can't actually get away with bad behavior. So
yeah, the make an example out of him strategy, the smash lifetime ban strat. Yeah, I understand. There is merit to that. Historically, I think that has been a pretty effective strategy for humans. So, is it entirely fair in that individual case? Maybe not, but I understand what you're saying. When you're talking about are we analyzing the net benefit of this situation? That's an inverted take to what I presented earlier, right? I was talking about the net benefit of him trying to swing good, and you're talking about this net benefit of potential people that maybe would have tried to get away with things, seeing that there's truly a zero tolerance for that, even for somebody as untouchable or seemingly untouchable as Red Eye might have a net gain by a preventative measure. Obviously, impossible to measure. Fuck, if only we had a god tier view of real life and we could get this data, my friend. But that's an interesting thought. I think worth pondering on further.
No, 100%. We stuck on this topic for a long time, but I think we did cover a lot of nuance. Am I being too kind to ourselves? But I think we covered a lot of nuance in this thing. I think, yeah.
I hope so. I've recently, with that whole conversation I had with Trent about the balance around PA, I've realized that nuance gets lost on a lot of listeners. But I have faith in your audience. Hopefully we didn't step in it too hard.
Fuck, dude, I do not. Guys, be nice on us. Be nice to us. I'm kidding. So let's shift gears here, but trying to think, where did I want to go with this after? Because I thought this was I was saving for the end. I was like, this is a super hard conversation. You want to start with this, but we actually went in on it. We went on it. So I want to ask a couple of questions to follow up from last time we did the podcast. We focused mostly on the book Surviving Esports. If y'all are fans of the Dota world and the talent world and back behind the scenes of esports, go read that. I'm making a shout out for you, Zyori. You don't have to do it yourself.
It's Christmas time. Great stocking stuffer. Amazon.
There we go. I asked you a question that did LD and Gods read your book, and what was their reactions to that? I don't know if they did read that or they've given you reactions, but if they have, I would love to hear that shit on a personal front. That's peak tier drama.
I've got a small update, but not really one that you're gonna love. I have not directly asked them if they've read it. I assume Gods has not, and that LD has skimmed it. I don't know for sure, but I have weirdly reconnected with the Davids in a way I never thought possible. Another intangible net benefit of the MeToo movement. We had some personal after I posted my second video, the very short one that was more direct and kind of thoughtful. Obviously, the first one was like a raw reaction that happened to flow from a live broadcast, just sort of happenstance. LD reached out immediately and was just like, all right, man, I got to apologize, but if you want to talk about anything, I didn't know that you felt uncomfortable, and if you're willing to talk, it would make me feel better to try to work through some of this shit. So obviously we connected and we talked through a lot of shit over a series of long Discord phone calls. And then that kind of led to a reunion with Gods as well. So not the three of us together, but one-on-one, with each David, we chat pretty regularly now. And, we're kind of working together to try to save Dota in North America more so than thinking about like a Moonduck versus BTS rivalry. So what does that actually mean or look like? Who the fuck knows? But I think those lines of communication are more open now than they've ever been before. And I think everyone is more receptive to that true cross collaboration of, could we see an elimination mode in the BTS studio? I'd say the chances of that are still maybe 17% or so, but higher than ever before, right? Just a bash away from victory. So yeah, I don't know. I don't really know or care. I don't want to have the awkward conversation of asking them directly at this point. it's water under the bridge. You know, the book
Yeah.
still tells a great story, but we've all moved on. We've all grown a lot since then, and you know, those are just fun memories now.
All right, that's fair. I don't think you could, like, they have to come to you, be like, listen, yo, sorry, the shit here, it's a bunch of that would have to be the case. You can't be like, yo, I said this, what did you think? That would be kind of weird, but I'm glad to hear that you guys have reconnected, because I think it's funny, but they, in North America, in terms of how the Dota production realm runs, is actually quite similar to here in South Africa, because I don't know if I'm getting my history here right, but basically, there was a company called Nav TV, and all the big broadcasting talent and who are now working the TOs and all of that kind of stuff, they were all consolidated in one thing before. So like you guys, the Three Amigos, Moonduck and BTS were one thing. Zyori was there before, and you all split up, and there was beef for a while. Yeah, we had the same thing. There was all these people were there together. This one screwed that one screwed this one, and all these fucking people hate each other. But at the same time, North America is obviously much bigger than South Africa. But in South Africa and North America, we also have to make that realization is that we're small fucking scene. We actually have to collaborate on shit. Like, if we don't, the scene will fucking die. So let's try be better. Let's try deal with each other as humans today instead of the past. And that's actually needs to happen. And because, like, NA Dota, I thought it was dead already. I thought, like, I mean, if you look at EG's team, what's NA left there, dog? That's the only good team, but they're not even NA anymore. So, yeah.
No, it's bad. It's real bad. And I don't know if we're succeeding in saving it right now, but at least on a high level, we've had that conversation of like, hey, man, let's not work against each other. At the very least, let's exchange some notes. Let's try to, just be aware that we're open to strategizing when those opportunities arise. So that's just led to a lot of really positive conversations, and who knows where it goes, because COVID has complicated everything. I think we're all just kind of taking it in month intervals. Everyone's just trying to stay alive and, keep things moving, and you're doing the best you can with the limitations of lockdowns and COVID restrictions. But, it's really hard to predict 3 months from now what we're going to be able to do and where we can do it. Right.
No, that's fair. I really wanted, in my head, I had like a mental note that I really didn't want to talk to you about Dota at all, because I mean, you have podcasts about that. There's so much content about Dota there. I don't watch that much Dota anymore during this lockdown either. But I want to ask one thing, because I do have still, a certain level of 11K MMR ready to flame in me about Dota and shit that's going on, is that this is the first time ever as a Dota fan I'm a bit worried about how things are going, because I think this is the one time, okay, Valve never steps up. If we just look at CSGO, they're waiting for that game to die so they can, work on something else. But Dota, yes, they announced this big plan and stuff for the DPC, etc. But it was a whole year that went by. They planned us online leagues. They never implemented it. They still haven't said anything about going into 2021. Like, they canceled the CSGO. I don't know if they canceled it or they said it's looking kind of sus for the CSGO major. So I'm a bit worried about the state of Dota, actually, because I think if there's a time the game could die, it would be now. Not dead, because it'll always be the hardcore player base. I don't think I'll ever stop playing Dota, but I think it could have a big effect what they're doing right now, or what they're not doing, rather.
Yeah. We're losing value. Teams just evaporating is like things grow by team contracts getting kind of outbid by demand in the market, right? JStorm has a team. They have a fat buyout clause. Then somebody comes along. EG says, hey, we want to buy Fear. They pay JStorm that $300,000 buyout. JStorm ends up making money on Fear as a player based on the investment of his salary and all that stuff over the years when you count the winnings and all the leveraging and the merch and all that kind of stuff. That's the general business model for a lot of teams. That's really how they monetize outside of like investors and ad sales and stuff. Most teams can't sustain on ad sales alone. So when you have teams like JStorm just exit, where they just say, all right, we're losing money, pull the ejector, we're done, all those clauses go away. So now if you and I wanted to start a team in North America, you could just go to those 5 players and say, hey, you guys want to join my team? There's nothing we have to buy out. There's no contracts. They're just 5 players looking to join a new team. So that's the kind of value that gets lost in the ecosystem that scares me, because it took us a lot of years to build that value up, and now it's just gone. There's a difference between low demand, where things hold steady, and no demand, where you can't justify your current cost of operations based on the futures anymore. And that's the point we've hit. And I mean, EG's playing in another fucking region now. So Yeah, it's bad in NA. It's rough in SA. It's always been rough in those regions. Dota as a whole, player base is sort of plateaued but okay-ish, and in the peak regions, Dota is still growing in terms of viewership. So it is a balance, right? The rich are getting richer. The top players still have a big draw, but it does sadden me that we don't seem to have any real influx of this next generation. And in North America especially, I mean, we're going to see it. This next DPC in 2021, the Div 2 North America is going to be an absolute fucking joke. Mark my words here. Timestamp this shit, clip it, and then when you see the level, the quality of play, when Arkosh Gaming is tearing it up in Division 1, you're going to understand what I'm talking about in Division 2 North America. It's going to be something.
That's fair. I think the Akash thing was also interesting on its own, right? That Slacks decided to invest in a team, even though everybody's like, yo, the Dota 2 in NA even worse. But I think for me, a lot of my frustration comes is that I don't know if you ever read that Cecilia Di Anastasio article when she's like, it was called the Esports Bubble or something like that. And I think she really highlights one of the big issues in esports, and it's something we used to talk about on the old version of this podcast so often, is that developers, there's no issue for Valve here. They've hit record numbers on their compendium sales. People are still playing the game. They're still making mad money. There's no incentive for them to really give a fuck, right? I mean, they've done nothing for CSGO for 20 years, and CSGO is like one of the biggest games in the world. It grows year on year. So in their minds, they're doing a great job, right? It's like, doesn't matter.
People speak with their wallets. So when we're talking about the game, we're really talking about like the esports infrastructure.
Yes, I'm also talking about that. But I think
it's just to clarify the verbiage. You know, I don't think Dota is dying as a game. I don't think European or Chinese Dota is like dying in terms of esport ecosystem anytime soon at all. But I think the other regions in terms of esports and Dota, it's going to be a tough like the 5-year prospectus is rough.
Right. But I mean, even in the EU region, I mean, it's kind of sad for the Dota esport that so many of the big orgs now really just don't invest in Dota. Not at all. I mean, there's no G2 in Dota. NIP has just dropped their team. Cloud9, they fucking dropped out. All the quote-unquote the big orgs don't want to invest in Dota. So it's like, it's very sad for our esports model. I think maybe for we know the next year when they actually do run their leagues and stuff, maybe Moonduck is contracted to do the league for NA. I don't know. They could be much better. It could be more opportunity for the lower teams and such. But man, oh man, I mean, it's always been a feast or famine situation in the Dota 2 world where the real pros, the guys, the EGs, the VPs are fucking canning it, making the most money, and the other guys can't even afford a loaf of bread. But I think this year we really needed, I think Valve needed to step up this year, and it never happened. So I don't know what's the next year going to look like.
We'll see. Part of me does feel like there isn't much sense in being overly doom and gloom about it and just kind of embrace what we've got. And even if that is accurate analysis, that we're on this, slow bleed kind of death, then, well, buddy, we're ahead of the curve, and let's spend the next 5 years enjoying the last 5 years of Dota. If that's really how no matter how you cut it, you can always spin it to be kind of positive. That's sort of my take these days. I feel lucky to be a part of every event that I'm working now. It's fun. It's exciting. I feel more confident than ever. So, yeah, you're probably right. I agree. We got some issues in some regions, but I'm over bitching about it. I've been yelling about it for a lot of podcasts now, and nobody seems to care. So, I don't know, bud. I don't know. I'm yelling about European games right now, so life's good.
That's cool. So from a TO's perspective, I feel like there's been a lot of conversations that get had around third-party struggles. Now, you've been a third-party TO yourself, and they say no third parties make money. Like a lot of people say even ESL are not making money and such. They're the premier in third-party. So do you think there's reasons in terms of applicable reasons you can put together why it doesn't work and fixes that could be made? Or do you think it's a case of where I maybe have this underlying bias in theory that the sports model for esports can't really work, and it's the developers that really are canning it, and we do actually have a bit of a bubble in a sense? I don't know if what I'm saying makes sense to you, but what are your thoughts on that perspective?
It's hard to pin down. I think part of it was the Dota TV thing. We've made that change now where you can control people not stealing your shit. in a period where it's hard to run events. So it's hard to say like, yeah, now we can sell sponsors again because now we can't sell sponsors for other reasons. But I think that the biggest issue with Dota sponsor wise is if you take betting sponsors out of the equation, it's a really tough sell. There are a couple of orgs that are really nailing it. You know, ESL with their Mercedes activation, that's a really big high profile thing for Dota. Part of that has to do with the freedom and the flexibility they have, like DHL as well. Like that's a testament to the ESL sales team, which is no small team. So it's a big investment. It is not impossible. It's just impractical for your average org that has one or two dedicated salespeople, or a part-time salesperson in the case of Moonduck, seasonal, let's say, as on demand for events. But the biggest issue I have with people, when I was trying to sell on Dendy, for example, it wasn't a factor of the raw numbers of his reach. It was mostly demographics and relativity. So demographics is, you look at Dota, the big numbers are all in CIS, Southeast Asia. South America is all on Facebook, which not many people care about. So, Europe is still pretty good, but not as good as you'd think, because there's a high opportunity cost of other entertainment and other sponsors, just like there is in North America. So the equation becomes, okay, cool. Yeah, I've heard of esports. Esports is awesome. Fortnite sounds like a lot of people really love it. Why should I spend my money on Dota instead of Fortnite or one of these other esports that I've heard of, like League of Legends? And there isn't really a good answer to that question. You got to be a real snaky salesman to be able to find an answer that makes Dota look good. Like, why should I sponsor Dota over League? It's like, I don't have an answer for you, Gillette. They've got more of a demographic that can buy your product. They've got bigger reach, and they've got more crossover with the general audience and other games. There was a really cool heat map that LD linked me the other day that shows like the crossover of all these different games, and Dota is out on this little island, and League is out on this kind of peninsula mini island. Like, it almost wants to be an island, but it just sort of shows how Dota is Dota, and it's its own kind of thing, and it is an esport because it checks all the boxes. But in terms of esports, the general industry, it really does feel like everything else versus Dota when you look at the general audience base. So I think that's also part of it, is it's just people don't know how to crack that nut. We're the crazies out on the island that don't get along with the mainlanders, We're the Iron Island folks or something in Game of Thrones. I don't know. We're like out on our own. We got our own culture out here. We're really toxic and mean to each other, but we're all kind of addicted to it. So it's weird. Right. We all like denounce toxic culture, and then by the time I lose 3 pubs today, I'm gonna be like, "Yo, motherfucker, use your BKB. Are you dumb?" So, and that's like, I know it's going to happen, and then I'm going to feel bad about it, and I'm going to wake up tomorrow feeling like I can do better, both in terms of gameplay and my attitude. Right. I'm the change I want to see in the world. And we have this weird addiction to Dota. So it's a shitty answer to your question, but that's like a hard nut to crack. How do we get people onto our island? And I found most of the time when you look at these big sponsorship deals that are in Dota, it's simply because somebody works at that company who plays Dota and understands the island. That's it. That is, if you were to draw a map of correlation, this sponsorship in Dota, how did it happen? It's because that senior marketing guy goes home and is addicted to the fucking toxicity and knows how hardcore Dota fans are, and knows that if you can position it right, that audience will open up the wallet and really resonate with key products. Point an example, Kennedy Space Center. Greatest activation we've ever done at Moonduck. We'll be forever proud of that. One of the most customized activations we've done, where it included Slacks and Purge going on site to film like a little mockumentary type series of them walking around, so we could weave that into the content of the production. Gave us all the merch and the costumes and this great swag bag and all this bullshit. They hooked us up with the works, but that allowed us to create this immersive theme around the event that hyped up the audience so much. And that's the kind of activation that they saw that, and they were like, we want a piece of Midas Mode 2. How much? That's how that conversation went. Do you know how rare that is for a sponsor to approach you like, hey, the first one was awesome. We know you gave us a good deal. You more than delivered. We want round 2. Send us a proposal. That's awesome. That's the dream, dude. That's how you know you've actually done something that provided value. And it worked because we read the audience, and we knew the audience would be hyped about space stuff. The flat earthers were bummed, but everybody else was hyped.
Yeah, Slacks.
So
You just lied in the documentary. You didn't really care about that, you flat earther. I'm kidding.
yeah. So, but it's not impossible. But again, how
Right.
did that sponsorship come about? Just a guy that was connected, that knows Dota, knows Slacks, likes his content, is enough of a Dota head to understand the hardcore nature of our audience, and that if you can give somebody that freedom to really make it connect, it can fucking work. So that's the same shit with the Mercedes and ESL. I can only imagine, and some of these other big, like I'm sure like AMD with Dota Pit, they've had that title sponsor for a while. There's a couple, but I think most of it is rooted in the quote luck of somebody that has access to that spending power of a marketing budget that also just happens to play Dota. It's finding those people that allow me to get sponsorship dollars. The actual like cold calling, the going on sponsor pitch and sending proposals to big brands, I still haven't been able to figure out the how do I sell them on Dota after I've sold them on esports.
Right. That is,
and I still don't know. I mean, that's the $1 million. If you can answer that question, you can save Dota.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm working on it right now.
Challenge to everyone out there, please.
Gavin, send me my check. The answer's coming in the email tomorrow. No, I'm kidding. But I think that your point you make is something I agree with completely. I think Dota would never die as a game because it always will have that hardcore community. Because I think a similar example of what you were saying about the island, when Overwatch came out and it was so hyped when it came out, every single other game lost a big chunk of its player base because they went to go play Overwatch. Except Dota 2, because Dota 2 people didn't even fucking know Overwatch existed, and they didn't care because there's nothing that gives you the same feeling as fucking playing your 7th ranked game of the day, shouting at some Russian and having some Russian shout at you. That is the beauty of Dota 2. So from a niche point of view, it can never die, but like you say, from an esport perspective, I also, as a Dota fan, and I wholeheartedly believe Dota is the best game in the world by far. I don't know how to sell the game because it is so, barrier of entry is like 1,000 hours of gameplay. There's nothing that's done by developer to help support the third parties, really.
Getting into Dota now is like getting into EVE Online if you've never played before. It's like, dude, if you've never even looked at the interface before, don't bother. You're just greener pastures, focus on something else. And I feel similar with Dota or even League of Legends. Like, if you haven't started by now, I don't know how you get into it. And people tell me that. They're like, it just seems really intimidating. Like, it is. It really is. We don't have a newbie pool. You queue your first unranked game, and they're going to expect you to know stuff. And you're going to be like, well, how was I supposed to know that? And the answer is, well, I don't really know. I'm not sure. You just have to watch videos and kind of piece it together, and that's part of the fun. It's like Donnie Darko. Well, how was I supposed to know that the answer's in that stupid fucking book that they reference? Well, you figure it out with your friends and you read the book and then you feel special because you cracked the code. That's what makes it a cult classic. It's not because it's a good movie. It's because they planted that seed that got people all hot and bothered in the real world. Right. It's genius marketing, you see.
That's hilarious. Now I want to touch on one thing as well before we go. I don't know if you're aware of the situation, but it kind of ties back into our cancelling situation, the conversation we had about Red Eye earlier. Did you follow what happened with NIP and that CSGO player for Flaren? Richard Lewis did a long podcast with him, I believe.
No.
You didn't? Okay, so basically the
I
situation...
missed the whole thing.
Let me see if I remember correctly. Was that for Flaren and them were I don't even think it was CSGO, it was the one before that, 1.6 assumption. They were like the fucking... team secret of their day. They used to win everything. They were the top team. They were the biggest, baddest fish in the sea. They were the guys. I think even in where country they come from, Sweden or some shit, they had like McDonald's sponsorships and things. Those were the early days of esports, and they were big shots. And NIP as a company really fucked them over, him and his teammates, in a lot of ways. So when that story came about, a few months later, or maybe a few months before, I can't remember. I think it was later actually. There was that coach. What was his name from NIP, the Dota coach who had beef with PVD and the organization there as well, and also saying like a lot of shady stuff about NIP and stuff. And I want to know what your thoughts on consequences for orgs who mistreat their players and stuff in that sense, because individuals is one thing, but I think it's not something we really see often yet, but I think the fucking consequences for orgs pulling those stuff should be much higher actually, because that's your whole business. doing this shit. Not just one individual having a bad day or this or that or whatever other fucking excuses people make. It's you as an entity went and fucked over your employees and are now trying to compete in this tournament, that tournament, whatever. And I think it's maybe a tough discussion, but is it like, what do you have any thoughts on that regard?
I mean, there isn't really an amazing answer to the question, and that's the issue. Ultimately, I think player unions are what you're getting at. That's the protection that generally helps them, so that when they're engaged with an org, it's just like we talked about with the Johnny Depp thing, right? The whole situation is balanced by him having good representation, so that kind of no matter what the major outcome occurs, he has a winning hand to some degree. And obviously players that don't know better, you don't know what you don't know, and you think people are, nicer than they actually are, and they're not going to take advantage of you, so you're willing to trust them. I don't think there's anything else you can do really besides have a union or legal counsel or an agent or a manager or someone that can represent you, know the right questions to ask those questions, not be afraid to be a little bit of a bully and stand up for you. That's the whole point, is like, you don't have to be the jerk. You can sit in the back and your lawyer will negotiate whatever you want on your behalf. And then you kind of go from there, and you make sure you don't sign bullshit contracts where you're giving away your money or your rights to somebody else. I mean, look at the music industry, same kind of thing. Artists used to get completely ripped off, sign away the lifetime rights to everything. Like Dave Chappelle, same thing. He's talked about it a lot with Chappelle's show. He signed away the rights to his likeness in perpetuity throughout the universe. That's a ridiculous contractual clause. Why did he sign that? Because he was young, didn't know better, didn't have a lawyer, didn't really give a fuck, and should have thought about it more. So, it sucks. It really sucks for the players. I agree with you. The org should be held to a high standard. Sometimes people get away with shit. I don't know, man. I don't really have a deep, thoughtful thing other than representation is generally a good thing.
Right.
There are people that specialize in being able to ask questions that you don't know to ask.
That's fair. I think
I've talked to enough lawyers and accountants to know that.
That's fair. I think also a lot of my frustrations, I also tell this to myself, and I just look at the esports scene in general, is that we're a very new industry. I mean, I know I work as a tier 2 caster for like EU and Russian events. I know how unregulated those fucking betting companies and stuff is. So that's kind of like a microcosm of the whole scene, actually. We're like 20 years old only. We still need to put all these systems and stuff into place and see how it goes as we go along and such. But we'll get there. I mean, like you say, it happens in the film industries, in the sports industries. People get fucked over. That's life in general. But at some point, like you say, hopefully we get lawyers and shit there to be able to represent players and things when they're in those situations. But it was actually another thing I wanted to talk to you about. It's not like I actually just my mind went blank after the first discussion because I was so into it, about the whole cancel culture and stuff, because we really had to think about that shit. But
we went pretty deep with it. We really did.
Yeah, I think so. Hopefully we don't get into too much shit. I think another thing I wanted to ask you about is that I read your blog recently about, National coming out there and stuff. So firstly, congratulations to you for, expressing yourself freely on broadcast and shit. Snare, who was here on the last podcast with you, he's also very much a believer in, doing what he fucking feels like. And I think of him as an alien because he's such a confident person in a way, and he's just one of those people who does what he does. But, it's nice to see other people also, like he also painted his nails for broadcast and things before and stuff. But it's good to see you do that. And I like the point, that realization when you wrote in your blog, that you said the realization about how important representation actually is, because so many people are reaching out to you about this stuff. And I mean, you spoke a bit about it earlier, but do you want to further elaborate on that a little?
Yeah, I don't know if anybody's seen this, but Aziz Ansari obviously had a unique kind of MeToo situation, and after a few years, he did a sort of a stand-up special, kind of just a long podcast that was on Netflix like a year ago or 2 years ago. I thought it was pretty good, and he talks about a lot of this stuff in there. And one of the things that he mentions is representation and how hard it was being an Indian person growing up in America and not ever seeing yourself in anything. And he does that joke where he says, "You know who the first person that was Indian I saw on MTV was? Me!" And that really made me laugh. It made me think, fuck. God, thinking back, did I ever see an Indian person on MTV? Of all the hours I watched of MTV growing up, I don't think so. Then he says, well, technically, I did see the bass player of Metallica, but he doesn't count. He didn't fucking say anything, and he was always in the background out of focus.
Right.
So, but yeah, I that was one of the first things that really hit me of just like, this representation thing. And just the amount of DMs and personal stories that I've gotten from people about, it's like kind of normal for people to feel lonely. And if you're the black sheep of your society, you feel extra lonely and isolated, and just being able to see even a part of yourself in something that's more mainstream, that's bigger than you are, is empowering and just makes you feel a little bit better and more positive about your existence. So, yeah, I don't know. Representation's cool, I guess. It's not something I ever had to think about, and I guess that's part of privilege, right? It's because I was always represented in everything, being a relatively white person. I'm a little tan, but mostly people see me as just a Caucasian guy. So there's a lot of Caucasian guys out there. And it wasn't until somewhat recently that just became something I think about more regularly, I guess.
Okay, that's cool. The reason I asked this because so people who know me and the work I do in South African Dota scene will know, or just the esports scene in general. Like I talk a lot about racism and stuff because obviously South Africa has a ripe history on this shit. But the representation question I think is important in not in esports, in gaming as a whole, because I think in gaming has a really fucking bad attitude about it, and it's something we lack. Like it's a very like 25-year-old white guy sort of thing, and that's like the setup that's there in gaming, and it kind of follows through in esports. And whenever there's like the slightest pushback to it, you have like people fucking crying to the utmost highest levels. Like if there's a fucking female, God forbid there's a female on the cover of the game, that's like the biggest human rights atrocity we've seen in the last 40 years, So the gaming scene has a bad attitude about this stuff, but I also do think in esports, and my view on esports is that's like the forefront, the biggest, it's supposed to be gaming at its finest or whatever. Also has a big problem when it comes to representation. I mean, I just look at like the amount of people of color involved in the scene, working as talent in the games involved, etc. It's a big, I think, in my opinion, it's a very big issue, but it's a conversation that actually hasn't been started yet. So I don't know. I don't know if you have, like, from a tournament organizer perspective, now that you maybe open your eyes in one sense, how deep are you specifically willing to go when it comes to hiring? How do you put together your stuff? Like, did you have a mentality shift, or is it business as usual, or what are your thoughts on that expanding? Obviously, it's quite recent for stuff you're going through.
For hiring and stuff, I mean, overall, I believe in meritocracy above all else. And in my ideal world, right, it's like the Star Trek universe. Everyone has an equal starting point. Everyone has equal opportunity, and it doesn't matter what your accent is or how much hair you have or what color your skin is. It's not something that anybody sees. We're not there yet, though. So just to say, like, I don't see color is right. So reductionist to the whole thing that we're trying to do here, right? But that is sort of the end goal. So at the end of the day, I still believe in hiring the best person for the job. And on my side, giving equal opportunity to every resume, regardless of any of those aforementioned things, So I've always believed pretty strongly in meritocracy. And if you're a good enough caster, I don't really care, what you do. It's based on the merit of your skills. So I think we've always been pretty receptive to that, and always tried, especially at Moonduck, they tried to make a conscious effort to not look at people based on anything superficial, but really just try to analyze, are they a good fit? Will this person be good for the project we're doing? What do they bring to the table? So that part, I guess, hasn't changed so much, but maybe it's just changed on more of like a personal level of just understanding how important it is to others. And like, it's like the next level of empathy where you're really understanding something from someone else's perspective and realizing, like, I never had to think about this, and that's why I didn't really think about this until I was in my late 20s, and that's part of me trying to really listen to other people and understand where they're coming from when they say, hey, this is important to me, instead of just having it bounce off of like, yeah, sure, they just said something's important to them, I don't know or care. You know what I mean? There's like sort of a shit. So that's, I would say, maybe it's more on a personal level. On a business level, I don't want to make it sound like we've, that's the thing. It's not like, wow, we've learned so much, we've changed our practices. It's like, no, I kind of stand I think we gave a lot of people equal opportunity. You know, we hired Annie, we hired Moxie, we hired Slack so no one else would. We invested in people that were, you know, not that Annie or Moxie were risky, but I think we definitely saw Slacks as a potential brand risk the very first time we hired him. So, you know, we're willing to take risks on people that are different in some way.
I mean, even you guys hired D2 Bowie. I feel like for Jungle Jam, I was like, I always complained that I really want to see this guy work more events because, again, from a representation point of view, you can say there's nobody from South America, all that kind of nonsense. But from a practical point of view, like you say on merits, this guy is bringing something new to the table. He's like, the way he does his analysis and stuff is like Purge Weatherman Report, which is a big hit at every TI where they have it. It's like they could have that at every event if they just hired the South American guy, you know? Why are we only looking in one place and for one demographic and one kind of talent? And it becomes... I mean, me and Stacks also spoke about this, and he was like, yeah, there's like safety part of it, but again, we have to find that balance of trying to get your best broadcast and having the safe broadcast. But I think we fall too much on the safe broadcast side in esports world in general. I mean, you and Moonduck, you guys in Moonduck do push the boundaries a lot. Like, y'all are fucking nuts, which I love. Yeah,
it's hard to balance. It's not necessarily easy for a TO, and you're right. It's sort of easier for us because we've just embraced it. So it's like, you know, we know the limits of the sponsors we're working with, and then kind of build around that, and then push it to the absolute limit, and then some of whatever they say we can get away with. So, yeah, I think we've made an effort to be inclusive in our own way, not in. I think, not to go too deep, like off the Dota topic, but I think this conversation is gearing towards sort of a misnomer when we talk about equality and this like equality versus equity type thing. And I think there's sometimes a falsehood in the dialogue that the ideal scenario is like a 50-50 gender split in every single position. Because like in the case of esports, it's like, well, I don't have 50-50 women to give opportunities to as I do men. So it's like, yeah, I agree that like there shouldn't be this social stigma of women gamers. And if there wasn't that stigma, it would be closer to 50-50. But even if we had this ideal universe where everything was equal and everyone could do whatever they want, would men and women still play video games in a true 50-50 number? I'm not sure. You know, why are there more female doctors than male nurses now? I don't know. And like, is that some form of like biology and how we're wired, and just like, you know, why are there more male engineers? Is that because women are kept out of engineering, or is it because women, for whatever reason, are just less interested in engineering as opposed to like a doctor path? Again, I don't know the answer to these questions. I'm just saying that saying everything should be 50-50 might not necessarily be the target we want to hit. I think the target we want to hit is removing those barriers at the entry point so that it's like 50-50 in terms of opportunity, but then let people kind of do whatever they want. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's sort of how I think about that equality of, it's like equality of outcome. I don't want to guarantee equality of outcome. I want to guarantee equality of opportunity. So it's like I said, I want to give every resume a fair chance, regardless of gender, orientation, race, religion, any of that stuff. They all get looked at and considered equally based on the merits of the skill set on the resume. That's a quality of opportunity to the best that I can make it within my control of the system. I don't believe there is true equality of opportunity, but from like who I have the sample from hiring from, I'm looking at minorities just as much as I'm looking at majorities, if that makes sense. So but I can't guarantee that we're going to hire 50% men and women or an equal spread of races, so to speak.
For sure. I mean, from a broadcast point of view, in terms of like even hiring process, again, like you say, it's tough just on sheer numbers. You're going to have maybe one application from a person of color and 60 from like white dudes. So it's like, as a TO, it's hard to kind of balance that yourself from that aspect as well. But like from a perspective, like from my fans' point of view, why I get kind of frustrated with, maybe I'll stick to Dota broadcast because that's actually what I watch. I don't watch too many other fucking games, but like I feel like it's a very monotonous thing watching Dota broadcast. Like I enjoyed watching the League of Legends panel more than I watched Dota panel, but it's not about in terms of skill sets, people being better. And it was a very subjective thing also. It's just, I like
just different perspectives.
It's like they emphasize like swagger. Maybe again because I'm a brown person, like I think I can see different in culture things that like we emphasize the swag. The people there are good looking, they have styles, they're sitting on their chairs like this. It's not the most hardcore analysis thing, you know. So I think that's where I think about like the representation from like different ethnicities. Is like if you have a black guy on panel or like an Indian guy on panel, or like you're gonna have like a different perspective in terms of like, again, if you hire from different regions, specifically for getting ethnicities, you're gonna have different perspectives on the game because all the servers play differently. But you also have like a new flavor on the panel. I think that's why, and it's something Dota struggles with beyond just like representation in terms of demographic. If you look at whenever there's a new host that comes into Dota 2, there's always somebody from an outside game. Machine, Richard Campbell. Obviously, these people are fucking amazing at their job, but the Dota community is always drawn to them because it's something new that they're getting. So I think this is what I was trying to also when I had the conversation with Slacks. I think there actually is a big opportunity in terms of taking quote unquote risks on new people, because it can be risky because you know how Reddit threads can go, but again, it can also pan out because we do kind of we get monotonous in Dota scene, I believe. That's just my opinion.
So you're being very nice about this, but I think so tell me if I'm completely wrong here, but I think what I just described before you just responded is basically the definition of that like kind of privileged perspective of it's very easy for me to say, yeah, it's just a meritocracy, you know, like I'm trying my best to give everybody a chance, but you know, whatever, I'm just working with what I've got. And your point is that isn't necessarily entirely fair because there's something to giving someone a shot that represents a minority group that might not be objectively at the top list on the meritocracy, but kind of deserves, like, maybe I don't want to make this sound like negative or something, like some bonus points because they bring something new to the table, they're fresh and they're different, and it's not always about being the best of the best, it's about making the best show, and sometimes the best show means doing something different. And that means taking a risk on somebody who's not established and might be a person of color or a minority in some other kind of a way. And that is sort of the essence of this like modern movement of like it's like subconscious racism, where like despite my best efforts to try to be as inclusive as possible by saying just a meritocracy is the dream, I'm not really empathizing with the people of color that have a different struggle to work their way up that meritocracy.
Yeah.
Did I just say a bunch of bullshit, or am I kind of right?
I think you understood. I understood me right. You understood your perspective right. You understood my perspective right. I think it was pretty good.
Because you're a person of color, so that's why I'm asking specifically if that's like.
It was pretty good.
You know.
No, I think you're on the money.
Did you feel like I was being subconsciously racist in my little meritocracy rant?
No, not really. I think like. Okay, I'll be honest and say I did come off like it was like a very privileged perspective in terms of what I saw. So you read that right, but I think I like you can't really blame you for thinking that because that's the perspective you come from. You only know your perspective. Like that's why I thought it interesting when I read your thing about representation in your blog, because now you have a new perspective, right? So that's how we learn, how we grow. But the reason I kind of push this point, even if I'm being like, if some people think I'm being hardcore or whatever, is I think in talent it's a very fucking low risk thing to do because esports broadcast is esports broadcast. I mean, when you get to a panel, right, 50% of the people switch off because then the game's not on. They go get coffee, they go get food, then they come back. So I think for me, if people want to take that chance and actually do, you know, like give the people the bonus points or however you want to phrase it and put a new person, a new demographic, etc. there, it's not zero risk, obviously, but it's very low risk because from a team environment, you can't say, oh, okay, we 5 white guys, let's give this black guy a chance because it's very cutthroat. If you lose a game, there's no, you get less prize money, you get more of this, you get that. But from a talent perspective, I was like, listen here, there's no, like, I don't know, just take a chance every now and again. And like the kind of black talent we do have, I mean, like Malik Forte, it's not a lot, but the guys who are there, they're like really fucking good. But obviously, he's not like giving a chance when you hire Malik Forte. He's a fucking good talent. I think there could be more of these guys out there that we're just not seeing. So I think it has to be that 50-50. It can't be about giving people chances in the case of, oh, we're going to try to be more equitable, even though that's part of it. It's a case of like, let's be creative and also maybe give our broadcast an edge and advantage because we have, again, a new perspective in the game. But I don't know if you agree with my initial assessment that I find Dota panels a bit monotonous in the sense that it's kind of the same thing in a lot of shows. Okay, all right.
I agree. I mean, when we started Moonduck, that was part of our thing. Is we're not just a studio. We want to create a culture where everybody that's part of our culture can work with everybody in a way that's very fluid and very humor driven. The laughs are real. We're laughing off camera. We're laughing on camera. It's like I always use this analogy. It's like in Dragon Ball Z, when Goku realized he was wasting energy going Super Saiyan when he had to fight, and it was more efficient to just stay Super Saiyan all the time, so he's ready to fucking go and doesn't have to power up and waste all that time and energy. That's kind of what we were trying to do at Moonduck. Instead of it being serious and like, okay, energy, guys, 5 minutes before the panel, it's like we're already making jokes. We're the pre-show is happening in the green room before we go out and do the pre-show. We're already amped up, and that's part of our culture is that we feel comfortable with put-down humor, taking shots at each other, and all that kind of shit. So I lost my train of thought. Why did I start talking about Moonduck in the green room?
Oh, because okay, so firstly, I said the thing about, again, taking a chance on new talent in Dota, and then it was like, but you agree with my assessment that Dota panels are kind of monotonous.
Yes. So, yes, I agree that I think, like, we identified that as, like, man, this is a lot of just, like, white dudes and Merlini agreeing with each other. Let's spice this up a little bit. So, yes, I totally agree, and I think we've always tried to, every panel that I'm on, my thought process these days isn't trying to prove that I have some great Dota knowledge, or like, do any kind of flexing to the community. My goal is to be entertaining, to try to unlock more from my fellow co-hosts or analysts, to try to make the show engaging and fun, and to, if I have to, fall on my sword and do something goofy or talk about something irrelevant and take that heat to keep the show rolling. That's kind of what the host is supposed to do. I'm there to only kind of talk about Dota. Really, I'm there to get the other guys to talk better about Dota. So yeah, I always think about it as like, how can I make this more interesting? And that's why I love Richard Campbell, because he's definitely a source of inspiration, man. That dude's bringing energy to everything that he does. But yeah, I had another thought, but I lost it. So I must be getting close to the end of my coffee or something here, man. I don't know. A follow-up note on the racism stuff. Yeah, I think it's interesting, and it's all, that's sort of what I meant about when I wrote about the representation in the blog. Like, it's still a work in progress, right? Like, it takes time and personal discipline. Like, it's not just like a flip a switch where, man, I was kind of racist and I'm not racist anymore. It's a fucking process to rewire your brain to realize, as you said, like, I was speaking from a place of privilege, and I'm a little proud of myself that even after I said all that out loud, I heard it back and kind of felt like,
it's the good shit.
That did sound a little privileged, didn't it? And it's like almost reaffirming to hear you then like push it a little further and kind of be like, all right, man. And like, that gave me a little taste of what your world is like, listening to white people like me talk from a place of authority, having no real clue of the perspective, what it's like to be a person of color. And it's hard, and it just takes a series of conversations like this over a series of years to really understand that perspective. So really, I thank you, my friend, for A, being so nice about it, but B, still pushing it enough that we got to this point. So thank you.
No, thanks for engaging. Like, I like to have, like kind of like we were talking about at the start of the MeToo conversation. The big thing about what's going on is about growth, right? Like, even as a person of color, I can say how many racist things or such I do on a daily that I must go unlearn, because it's a big topic. There's so many things that play into it. You have to get better, and that's just it at the end of the day. We're just all trying to grow and learn, And I think if I don't think any fucking people who hire in Dota other than Zyori and Slacks even know about my podcast, but if y'all are listening, it also is a tough thing to try hire people of color in Dota, because it's a very high end game. Like in League of Legends, you probably have a lot more poorer demographics playing, because lower, I said that wrong, but you know what I mean. We have demographics who can play more, because you can play it on a fucking potato, but Dota, you need a super high-end PC and stuff. It's a very nerdy game as well. So it's not like you have abundance of people of color to choose from or anything like that. But the reason I always bring it up is that I want the thought to be there in your mind, that like, oh, okay, maybe there's another aspect we're not seeing there,
Being more aware of it. No, absolutely. And I think that's a really positive take. Like, I don't have a number that you have to hit of people of color you have to hire. It's more like, just be aware of this perspective, and if you see opportunities, try to seize the day. And I think that's like a super reasonable ask. I would also say, I think in League of Legends, it's part of the Riot narrative to be more inclusive, and I think they make more of an effort in terms of marketing and as a company to reach minorities and include people of like every demographic. And I think Dota is a little bit more of just like hey, we made this all. Like, I think Valve thinks of Dota as a platform, and Riot thinks of Dota as like a polished product. That's probably not like a perfect analogy, but it's like Valve created something amazing. They've got this workshop marketplace thing. All right, everybody, now knock yourselves out with this awesome sandbox we made. Excited to see what you create. And Riot is much more trying to control every aspect of it, position it so that nobody's left out. It's designed to be more inclusive and to be positioned in front of that audience. So hence, it's more likely to have people of color that play the game, ascend in the ranks, and become potentials for up-and-coming talent. If you don't put that effort in, it gets harder to reach those minority demographics, and I think that's part of why we have less of them in Dota. Does that make sense? Did I say that? Did I say that right?
Sense. But again, from like you say, Dota is also, Valve have a complete hands-off. Not complete hands-off like CSGO. That's the fucking real wild.
Pretty fucking hands-off.
We're pretty hands-off. So, again, if it's like the people involved, right? The Zyoris, I don't know what the ESL guys name. If they decide to do it. It's also, I think, a better thing for people of color or women involved in the scene, etc. Because then it's not a case of, the boss said you must hire a woman. Not saying that any of the people in the league broadcast don't deserve to be there because they're real good. Right. But it's, again, for people of color, then it's a different experience as well, which is also pretty cool. So that's why I think I have to look at it, especially when I speak in a public forum and when I'm talking to somebody big like you have to look at it from a positive aspect on the gains. Obviously, you have to look at the risk as well, but gains is a big thing.
Yeah. No, it's all a balance, right? And I think most people, I truly believe that most people are doing the best they can with the tools that they've got. You know? So, a lot of people aren't doing it right, but a lot of those people were not working with a full toolbox to get started. Yeah. So that changes the expectations. As I like to say a lot, you don't know what you don't know until somebody fucking tells you, and then you know it. But that first time, it's like, I see why people get got by scams, because until you know it's a scam, or somebody pulls you aside and goes, dude, don't fucking talk to that guy. It's a goddamn scam. And then they explain it. You go, oh, I understand now. So it's like learning is a process, and not all of us have the same access to the same learning tools. So it's fucking hard out there. And I generally believe people are good. There are some bad apples. There are some bad actors that aren't out there in good faith, but I think they're a pretty small minority. Just a loud one,
Yeah, unfortunately. But it is what it is. It's been a pleasure on this podcast with you so far, Zyori. Is there anything else you'd like to, add, touch into, dive into before we go? I'm an open guy. Anything goes on this podcast, except Code Red Flan that we're going to get sued.
Yeah, no, there's definitely been some hot takes on this one. So I'm actually excited to hear the feedback, and I hope there may be some points where I hope nobody stops listening, because it's like we got into some murky territory and then reconciled. So I'm glad we were able to be candid with each other. I always appreciate that, and that's why I started this Zyori +1 podcast. The whole idea is like, when I PM people about it, it's like no expectations, casual, just real talk. Let's really dive into some shit. And it's like, I'm not fishing for hot takes. I'm just fishing for good conversation and thoughtful dialogue. And it's frustrating because I think a lot of nuance gets lost. And I understand that a 90-minute podcast of heavy conversation is like a big commitment for a listener. So I understand why it's a lot to digest. And I've been trying to, step up the timestamps and the clips and all that kind of stuff. Which I hope you don't mind if I take a couple of these clips maybe for my new clip channel that we're working on YouTube. Look out for it. Zyori Clips. You'll find it soon. Up and comer. Hit the subscribe button. But yeah, man, life's a fucking journey. And, check out the blog I wrote. I hope that answers most of the questions people have of why I got a bra strap hanging out and, all the other things that have been happening in my life recently. It's weird, man. You think that things are going bad, and then all of a sudden you hit a winning lottery ticket in terms of coming to terms or processing something you've been working on for a while. And it's feeling good. I've been loving Epic League. The cast have been great. My co-hosts have been great. Everyone's been very supportive, and fucking means the world, man. So I hope I get to keep doing it. Cautiously optimistic for DPC in 2021. Yes. And, again, excited to work as much of it as I can.
That's so sweet. That is the greatest note you can end on. That was the best thing. Your outro was perfect. Let me stop fanboying. Zyori, thank you for your time. thank you to all the listeners who tuned in today. It's been a great episode 9. One of my favorites, I think, so far. Tough conversation, but one that needed to be had. So tune into this podcast on, of course, Apple Music, Spotify, Google Play, all the podcast platforms. We're there. And of course on YouTube to catch the video version of this podcast, which is the best one. I'm going to shill for the video one. Go on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, Esports Central. And yeah, stay tuned till the next one. Bye.